breath. Cowboy cried when his horse was bitten by a snake, until an Apache woman said, "I have a cure." The cowboy had always been used to the vast, empty deserts. The sun above seemed to burn forever, and the air was dry and hot. He had spent years riding across these endless lands, moving from town to town, often alone with his horse, his only real companion. He had lived in a world where life was tough and harsh, yet he had learned to embrace the challenge. But even he couldn't predict what was about to happen on this day.
It had started like any other journey.
He and his horse, a strong, reliable animal with a glossy brown coat, had been riding for hours through the desert. They had crossed wide stretches of land with no sign of life except the occasional cactus or dry bush. The cowboy's hat shielded his eyes from the glaring sun, and he kept a steady pace, knowing they needed to make it to the next waterhole before the day was over. The cowboy had learned long ago that in the desert time was precious. Phew! It could be a matter of life or death. The horse seemed to feel the same urgency. Though it was getting late in the day, it kept moving with determination, its hooves kicking up small clouds of dust. The cowboy admired his horse's strength and spirit, thinking about how they had been through so much together. It had been with him for years, carrying him through thick and thin. The bond between them was unspoken but deep, and the cowboy trusted the horse with his life. The feeling of being on the open land, with the wind rushing past and the quiet of the desert all around, made him feel free. But that freedom was about to be shattered. Breath. As they moved forward, the cowboy's attention was on the path ahead. The heat from the sun pressed down harder now, making him feel the weight of the day. His mind was on the waterhole, imagining the cool relief it would bring. Then, suddenly, his horse gave a sharp, strangled whinny. The cowboy pulled back on the reins, startled by the sound, and watched as the horse reared up on its hind legs. It was a movement the cowboy had seen before, usually when the horse was frightened or agitated. But this time, the cowboy could sense something was wrong. His heart skipped a beat as he quickly jumped down from the saddle and rushed to his horse's side. The animal staggered, its legs unsteady, as if it couldn't hold itself up. The cowboy's stomach sank. He had seen animals in pain before, but nothing like this. He crouched down beside his horse, his eyes scanning the animal's body for any signs of injury. That's when he saw it. A small, dark wound on the horse's leg. It wasn't much, but the sight of it sent a chill down the cowboy's spine. The wound was oozing a strange greenish fluid, and the horse was kicking its legs wildly, as if trying to get away from the pain. The cowboy had seen snake bites before, but he had never seen one on his own horse. His mind raced. He knew that a venomous snake bite could kill a horse in no time, especially in the desert, where the heat and the lack of water made it even harder for the animal to survive. He had heard stories from other cowboys about how quickly a snake bite could take down a creature. But to see it happen to his own horse, to witness the life draining from its eyes, was something he had never prepared for. The cowboy tried to keep calm. He placed a steady hand on the horse's neck, trying to comfort it, but the animal's body trembled with pain. The cowboy's voice was gentle as he spoke, trying to ease his horse's fear. "It's okay, old friend," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if the horse could hear him. "We'll get through this." "Psst, we always do." But even as he spoke, he could feel the fear growing inside him. He had no idea what to do. There were no other people around for miles, and he was in the middle of nowhere with no way of getting help. The cowboy looked around, his eyes scanning the barren land for any sign of life. The desert was silent except for the sound of the wind and the low whinnies of his horse. His heart pounded in his chest. It was moments like these that made him realize just how vulnerable he really was. He had always prided himself on being able to handle any situation, but this was different. This was his horse, his loyal companion, and now it was dying right before his eyes. He stood there for a moment, feeling helpless, unsure of what to do next. Should he try to walk back to the nearest town and get help? Could he even make it there in time? The sun was beginning to set, and he knew that the night would only bring more danger. The cold desert nights could be just as deadly as the scorching heat of the day. His horse was already weak, and he could see the life fading from its eyes. The cowboy knelt beside the horse, brushing its mane softly, trying to comfort it as best he could. He didn't know what else to do. He couldn't save it on his own, and he knew that time was running out. The air felt heavier now, as if the very land was pressing in on him. He had to think fast. His heart was breaking, but he couldn't give up. Not now, not with everything he had been through to get this far. As he sat there, staring at his horse, a feeling of despair washed over him. He had always thought he was in control, that he could handle anything the desert threw his way. But this was different. This wasn't a storm or a wild animal. This was something he couldn't fight. He had never felt so small, so powerless. The cowboy looked up at the sky, his eyes searching for something, anything that could help him make sense of the situation. And that's when he saw her. The cowboy stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to figure out what to do next. His heart ached as he looked at his horse, whose once strong body was now trembling with pain. The venom was spreading through the animal's veins, and the cowboy knew that time was running out. He had to act, but the vast desert around him offered no answers. It was just him and the horse, alone in the wilderness. The cowboy's hands trembled as he patted the horse's neck, trying to calm it, but the animal was restless, its movements becoming weaker with every passing second. It was hard to accept that this might be the end for his faithful companion. He had always relied on this horse, through long days, rough rides, and dangerous situations. They had been through so much together, and now the thought of losing it in such a cruel and unexpected way was almost too much to bear. As he sat beside the horse, he thought back to the days when they had first met. It had been years ago, back when the cowboy was still young and full of hope. He had come across the horse at an auction, a strong, wild animal that had been tough to tame. But the cowboy had recognized something in it, an untamed spirit, a fire that matched his own. They had spent countless days together, learning from each other, growing stronger together. The cowboy had never thought he would lose his companion in such an unforgiving place. His eyes moved across the desert, searching for help, but he knew there was no one. The closest town was miles away, and even if he made it there, what good would it do? The snake's venom was already coursing through the horse's body, and without the proper medicine or help, it was unlikely the horse would survive. The cowboy tried not to think about it, but the reality was setting in. He could lose his horse. The thought made his chest tighten. How could he have let this happen? A wave of helplessness washed over him. The cowboy had faced many challenges in his life, but none had felt as cruel as this one. There was no way to fight the venom or the desert's harsh conditions. He had always been able to rely on his strength, his skills, and his wits to survive, but this time, none of that mattered. This wasn't something he could control. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, the cowboy felt the weight of the situation settling heavily on him. He glanced down at the horse once more. It was still breathing, but it was labored, shallow. The animal's eyes were dull, and its body quivered with every movement. The cowboy swallowed hard. He knew the horse didn't have much time left. He reached for the reins, hoping to offer some comfort, but the horse barely reacted. The cowboy's throat tightened as he spoke softly to the animal, trying to reassure it. "Hang in there, old friend. Just a little longer." But his words felt hollow. The cowboy knew it was too late. No matter how much he wished it, the horse wasn't going to make it. He sat back on his heels, staring down at the creature that had been his closest companion. The cowboy's mind swirled with thoughts of all the places they had been, all the adventures they had shared. This horse had been with him through thick and thin, through good times and bad. Now it seemed like he was about to lose it in a way that was out of his hands. A sharp gust of wind blew across the open desert, making the cowboy's jacket flap. He barely felt the cold as he sat there, his gaze never leaving the horse. It was as if time had slowed down. Every moment seemed to stretch out, heavy with the uncertainty of what was coming. The cowboy tried to think of a solution, but his thoughts kept circling back to the same helpless conclusion. He couldn't save his horse. Just as he was about to give in to the overwhelming sadness that threatened to consume him, he heard something. A faint sound carried by the wind. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, the desert playing tricks on him. But then the sound grew clearer. It was the sound of hooves, steady and rhythmic. The cowboy's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the horizon. Could it be? Was someone else out here in this vast, empty desert? He stood up quickly, feeling a surge of hope, a spark of life flickering within him. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who could help. His gaze swept over the landscape, looking for the source of the sound. The wind carried it closer, and soon he could see the faint outline of a rider on horseback coming toward him. The cowboy's heart skipped a beat. This could be the help he so desperately needed. The rider grew closer, and the cowboy's hope only grew stronger. As the figure came into view, he saw a woman, riding a horse with the skill of someone who had lived in the desert her entire life. She moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes sharp and alert, as she surveyed the scene before her. She was dressed in traditional Apache attire, a stark contrast to the cowboy's rugged Western gear. But despite their differences, the cowboy felt an instant connection to her. She seemed to have an aura of calmness and knowledge about her, as if she had seen this kind of situation before. The cowboy stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea who this woman was or how she had found him. But in that moment, he didn't care. He was just relieved to see someone else, someone who might be able to help save his horse. The woman slowed her horse as she approached, her eyes assessing the situation. She glanced at the cowboy and then at the horse, her expression unreadable. The cowboy's throat felt dry as he spoke, his voice strained with desperation. "Please. My horse has been bitten by a snake. I don't know what to do." "Brett, can you help?"
The woman didn't immediately answer. Instead, she dismounted with grace and walked over to the horse.
"Desp." She knelt beside it, her hands moving quickly as she examined the wound. The cowboy watched her, his heart in his throat. What was she doing? Could she really help? The woman's words hung in the air like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. The cowboy's heart skipped a beat as he looked at her, unsure of what to say or do. He had been surrounded by desert silence for so long, and now, this stranger, this Apache woman, had appeared out of nowhere, offering him something he had no idea how to grasp. Breaths. She had a cure. Could it really be true? Right. His eyes shifted from her to his horse, whose breath was shallow and slow, its body trembling under the weight of the venom that was working its way through its system.
The cowboy swallowed hard, trying to push the panic from his mind.
He needed to stay calm. This was his only chance to save his horse. The woman didn't waste any time. Her hands moved with swift precision, her fingers deftly touching the horse's leg as she gently examined the bite. The cowboy took a step back, watching her closely. Her movements were confident, as if she had performed this kind of healing many times before. Braskin. She wasn't afraid, and for some strange reason, that reassured him. She knew what she was doing. The woman spoke again, her voice soft but firm. Snake venom can kill an animal quickly, but there are ways to slow it down. She stood up, moving toward the small saddlebag on her horse. The cowboy stood frozen, unsure of what to expect next. What kind of cure could she have in that bag? He had never heard of anyone in these parts having the ability to cure a snake bite like this. Most people, even if they had the right knowledge, wouldn't have the resources to treat such a thing so far from civilization. The woman returned to his horse with a small bundle of herbs in her hands. She began to sort through them, picking out specific leaves and crushing them gently in her palms. As she worked, she explained to the cowboy what she was doing, as if he needed to understand the process. Some plants can counteract the venom, she said calmly. The ones I'm using today are found only in the desert. They are not easy to find, but they can be powerful if used correctly. I've learned from my people, from my elders, who have passed down this knowledge for generations. The cowboy listened intently, trying to absorb everything she was saying. He had never met anyone who had such knowledge of the land, let alone someone who could heal the bite of a snake with such confidence. As she mixed the herbs together, he couldn't help but be amazed at how she moved, each motion deliberate, like someone who had been doing this for years. "Where did you learn all of this?" the cowboy asked, his voice soft with curiosity. The woman smiled slightly, though her eyes remained focused on the task at hand. "From the desert itself," she replied. "We live with it. We know its rhythms, its dangers, and its gifts. The land has much to offer if you know how to ask for it." The cowboy nodded, his thoughts racing. It was clear to him now that this woman was no ordinary traveler. She wasn't someone who just happened upon the desert and learned a few things along the way. She had lived here. She had spent her life learning the secrets that the land held, and now she was offering to share that knowledge with him. She finished preparing the mixture, and with gentle hands she applied the paste to the wound on the horse's leg. The cowboy watched in silence, his heart still pounding in his chest. He wanted to believe that this would work, but a small part of him remained uncertain. Could this really be enough to save his horse? The woman worked with a calmness that the cowboy found comforting. There was no rush, no panic in her movements. It was as if she knew exactly what needed to be done and how much time it would take. Her hands moved with steady confidence, massaging the herbal mixture into the wound with a practiced touch. She didn't say much more, but her presence alone seemed to reassure the cowboy. After a few moments, she stepped back and surveyed her work. The cowboy stood there, still uncertain, but he noticed something. His horse's breathing had slowed. It wasn't as shallow as it had been, and the trembling in its body seemed to ease. The venom wasn't gone, but the cowboy could see that something had changed. The wound wasn't as swollen, and the greenish fluid had stopped flowing from the bite. He felt a flicker of hope, like a tiny spark in the dark. The woman stood beside him, her eyes on the horse, watching for any signs of improvement. "It will take time," she said, "but this is the first step." The cowboy nodded, though his mind was still racing. How could one person with only a few plants be able to do what no doctor could? But the results were undeniable. His horse was still alive, and for the first time since the bite, the cowboy felt a glimmer of hope. The woman reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a small leather pouch. She handed it to the cowboy. "Keep this," she said. "It's a mixture of dried herbs. When the horse is better, you can use it to strengthen its body. It will help the horse recover faster." Desk. The cowboy took the pouch without hesitation, feeling a strange sense of gratitude toward this stranger. She had saved his horse, and in doing so, she had saved a part of him. He couldn't help but feel a deep respect for the Apache woman. She had arrived when he was at his lowest, offering him hope when there had been none. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." The woman nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You would have done what you had to," she said. "But I'm glad I could help." The cowboy glanced down at the horse again, still lying there on the ground but breathing more easily now. A fear that had gripped him earlier was starting to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. He was still uncertain about the future, but for now, things seemed to be getting better. "I don't know how to repay you," the cowboy said, still in awe of her knowledge and skill.
"You don't have to," the woman replied.
"You were kind to your horse. That is enough." The cowboy stood in silence for a moment, taking in her words. He had always believed that survival was about strength, about taking what you needed from the land. But now, he realized, there was more to it. There was kindness, wisdom, and a deep understanding of the world around him that he had never fully appreciated. He had been taught to fight for what he wanted, but this woman had shown him a different way, one that was rooted in balance and respect. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky with colors of orange and pink, the cowboy knew that this moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just a horse he had saved. It was a part of himself, and it was thanks to the Apache woman who had appeared just when he needed her most. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the desert landscape. The air had begun to cool, and with it, a peaceful silence fell over the cowboy and the Apache woman. She had done all she could for the horse, and now they both sat quietly, watching as the animal's breathing slowed to a more normal rhythm. The tension that had gripped the cowboy's chest earlier seemed to ease, and a quiet sense of relief washed over him. For the first time since the bite, he allowed himself to believe that his horse might actually pull through.
The Apache woman sat beside him, her eyes on the horse.
She didn't say much, but her presence was comforting. She exuded a calmness that the cowboy had never seen before. Even in the face of danger, when most people would have been panicking or trying to control the situation, she had remained steady and sure. It was as if she knew exactly how to handle the desert's harshness, its dangers, and its unexpected challenges. The cowboy, feeling a bit more at ease, finally spoke. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. He glances around in desperation. "What you did for my horse." Breath. The woman turned to him, her expression soft but serious.
"You don't need to thank me," she replied.
"You've shown kindness to the land and to your horse. That's enough, Raish. In the desert, it's not about what you have, it's about what you give." The cowboy looked at her, her words sinking in. He had lived most of his life in the desert, but it was clear now that he hadn't understood it the way she did. He had always seen the land as a harsh, unforgiving place, a place where survival meant taking what you needed and not asking for anything in return. But the woman had shown him something different. She had reminded him that the desert, like everything else, had a balance. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about respecting the land, understanding its rhythms, and living in harmony with it. "I've never thought about it like that," the cowboy admitted, his voice low. "I've always been about getting through the day, just getting by." The woman nodded, understanding. "That's how many of us think when we are young," she said. "Bray, we take what we need and move on. But the land. It gives us so much more when we understand its ways. It teaches us patience, humility, and gratitude. The cowboy looked at her, the weight of her words settling on him. He had always thought of the desert as something to conquer, something to overcome. But now he realized that it was not something to conquer. It was something to understand. It was a place that could be both beautiful and deadly. But it wasn't something to fear. It was something to learn from. As they sat in silence, the cowboy glanced down at his horse, whose breathing had steadied. The animal's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, a sign that the worst of the venom had passed. The cowboy felt a deep sense of relief. It wasn't over yet, but the crisis had passed. The horse was going to survive, and that was a miracle in itself.
I didn't think you'd be able to do it, the cowboy said, shaking his head in amazement. I've heard of people using herbs for things, but this...
Rasp. This is something else. The woman looked at him with a faint smile. The land has always provided for my people. We have learned its secrets, its remedies, and its gifts. It's not magic. It's knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. The cowboy nodded slowly, trying to process everything she had said. I guess I've been too focused on surviving, like I said.
I never thought to learn the land's ways. I've just been pushing through, trying to make it day by day.
The woman's gaze softened as she turned to him. Sometimes that's all you can do, she said. Survival is important, but there comes a time when we have to stop and listen. Listen to the land, listen to those around us, and listen to ourselves. Only then can we truly understand what it means to live. The cowboy was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts swirling. What she had said made sense, but it also left him with a feeling of discomfort.
Had he been living the wrong way all these years? Had he been so focused on surviving that he had forgotten how to truly live?
The question lingered in his mind as the stars began to appear in the night sky, each one a distant point of light in the vast expanse above them. After a while, the woman stood up, brushing the dust from her pants. The night is coming, she said. We should set up camp before it gets too dark. The cowboy nodded and stood up, grateful for her company. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the presence of another person until now.
Out here, in the wilderness, everything had always felt so isolated, so distant.
But tonight, for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel quite so alone. As they gathered their things and began to prepare a small fire, the cowboy looked over at the woman again.
How did you end up here? He asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. I mean, the desert isn't an easy place to live.
How did you learn all of this? The woman paused, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight.
I was born in the desert,
she said softly. My people have lived here for centuries. We know the land better than anything. It is our home, and it teaches us. We learn from it, and it teaches us how to survive, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually.
To live here, you must be in tune with everything around you. The animals, the plants, the weather, it all has a rhythm.
If you listen, it will show you the way. The cowboy listened intently, absorbing her words.
Bah, he had always thought of himself as a survivor, someone who could handle anything that came his way. But the woman's words made him realize that there was more to life than just surviving. There was a deeper connection to the land, to others, and to himself that he had been missing. Maybe it was time to start listening, to start learning. As they sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the ground, the cowboy felt a sense of peace settle over him. He still didn't have all the answers, and he still had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long while, he felt that he was on the right path. The desert, with all its dangers and harshness, had given him something far more valuable than just survival. It had given him a new understanding of life. The fire crackled softly between them, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The cowboy sat across from the Apache woman, the warmth of the flames a stark contrast to the cool night air. He had never been one for small talk, especially with strangers, but something about this moment felt different. This woman, who had appeared out of nowhere, had not only saved his horse, but had also shown him a new way of seeing the world. As the fire flickered, the cowboy looked at the Apache woman, his thoughts still swirling from everything she had shared with him. He had spent most of his life in the desert, but it had always been about survival, getting by day after day. Now, sitting here with her, he realized that he had been missing something all along. There was more to life than just surviving. There was a deeper connection to the land, to the people around him, and even to himself, that he had never fully understood. The woman looked at him with calm eyes, her face illuminated by the firelight. She seemed to be waiting for him to speak, as if she knew what he was thinking. After a long silence, the cowboy finally spoke. "Why did you help me?" he asked, his voice quiet but sincere. "You didn't have to. You didn't know me, and I don't even know your name." The Apache woman's lips curved into a small smile, her eyes thoughtful. "In the desert we help each other," she said simply. "The land is harsh. If we don't look out for one another, we can easily be lost."
I helped you because it's what my people do. We don't turn away from someone in need.
The cowboy nodded slowly, her words sinking in. He had never thought of it that way. He had always been on his own, never relying on anyone but himself. But here she was, offering help without a second thought. It made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. "I guess I've spent too much time alone," the cowboy admitted, looking into the fire. "I've never really trusted anyone. Thought I had to do it all myself." But the woman's gaze softened, understanding in her eyes. It's easy to become isolated, especially in a place like this. The desert can make you feel like you have to survive on your own. But the truth is, no one can do it alone forever. Brace, we all need each other, whether we realize it or not. He had spent so many years thinking that independence meant strength, that asking for help was a weakness. But now, as he sat here with her, he realized that the strength wasn't in doing everything alone. The true strength came in knowing when to accept help and when to offer it in return. The cowboy let out a sigh, feeling the weight of the last few days slowly lifting. His horse, still resting nearby, was breathing steadily, its strength returning. The woman had done more than heal the horse. She had reminded him of something important, that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about understanding, about connection, about balance. As the night stretched on, they sat in silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional stir of the wind. The cowboy glanced up at the stars above, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. The desert, once a place of isolation and struggle, now felt like a place of possibility. For the first time, he felt like he could see it through new eyes, eyes that understood not just the danger, but the beauty and the lessons it held. "Britt, I've been riding through this desert for years," the cowboy said, his voice soft. "But I've never really seen it until now."
The woman smiled, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. "It takes time to understand the desert," she replied.
"It's not something you can rush. You must learn to listen to it, feel it, and respect it. Only then will it reveal its secrets." The cowboy looked at her, feeling a deep sense of respect. She had shown him more than just how to save his horse. She had shown him how to live in harmony with the land, how to understand its rhythms, its dangers, and its gifts. He realized now that he had been so focused on surviving that he had forgotten to live. The desert was not just a place to endure, It was a place to learn, to grow, and to be part of something bigger than himself. The fire flickered low, and the cowboy felt his eyelids growing heavy. He had not realized how tired he was, how long the journey had been, until now. His body ached, but his mind was clear. The day's events had brought him a new sense of peace, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for this moment, for the woman who had helped him, and for the lessons he was beginning to learn.
I think I'm ready to rest,
the cowboy said, standing up and stretching.
Tomorrow, I'll head out.
I need to get back to my own people. The woman nodded, her gaze steady and calm. I understand. The desert is vast, but it has a way of bringing people together when they need it most. You'll find your way out. As the cowboy lay down beside the fire, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. The desert, once a place of endless struggle, now felt like a place of peace. The woman had opened his eyes to something he had been missing for so long: connection, understanding, and respect for the land. He didn't know where his journey would take him next, but he knew that it would be different. The cowboy was no longer just a man surviving in the desert. He was a man who had learned to live with it, to understand its ways, and to be a part of it. The horse stirred beside him, its breathing steady and deep. The cowboy smiled, relieved to see it recovering. He knew that, thanks to the woman's help, his horse would be fine. But more than that, he felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned. Life wasn't just about surviving. It was about learning, growing, and connecting with those around you, especially in a place as harsh as this. As he closed his eyes, ready to rest, the cowboy knew that he had changed. He wasn't the same man who had arrived in the desert so many years ago, seeking only survival. He had learned the most important lesson of all, that in order to truly live, you had to be in tune with the world around you, to listen to its whispers, and to embrace the balance it offered. Tomorrow the cowboy would continue his journey, but he would do so with a new understanding, a new sense of purpose. The desert was no longer just a place of hardship. It was a place of wisdom, and he had learned its most valuable lesson.
And with that, he drifted into a peaceful sleep, the desert night cradling him like a long-lost friend.